Right, so this is about expansion and contraction, and at Key Stage 3 you're expected to be able to describe what's happening when things expand and contract in terms of particles. Okay, so here's a good example of where expansion, a knowledge of expansion and contraction is very, very useful. Okay, it's important that bridge joints can actually move on hot days and cold days. Okay, so if you have a hot day, what happens is that these metal prongs, these little metal bits here, they will expand and start to fill the gaps. Okay, and on a cold day they'll actually do what it's doing here. They will actually contract, they'll take up less space. Okay, so what's the science behind this in terms of particles? Well, if you take a material and you look at the particles it's made up from, you'll remember from other videos and other lessons that the particles are really close together and they're arranged in rows and columns, vibrating gently from side to side. Now, if you give them more energy, they're going to vibrate much more vigorously, and each of the particles is going to take up a little bit more space. Now, you'll notice the size of the particles has not changed. Okay, what has changed is the amount of space each particle takes up. So when it vibrates much more than before, so it takes up a little bit more space. If all of the particles are doing this in a piece of metal, say, then what's going to happen is that the whole metal is going to take up more space. It's going to expand. If you think about it, the opposite is going to be true when it's put into a cold environment. So if you cool down that metal or any material, which is a solid, then what's going to happen is that these particles are going to vibrate a little bit less. They're going to get closer together, and the whole material is going to get smaller. It's going to contract. Okay, and this is obviously got to be taken into account, should I say, when we're looking at bridge joints, but also when we're looking at cables. Okay, so cables which go from pylon to pylon, they've got to be quite loose. Okay, so that on a hot day they're going to dip down. On a cold day or a cold night, what's going to happen is that they're going to contract, so they're going to get much shorter. Now, you don't want, when your cables are between the pylons get shorter, we don't want them to pull on those pylons and pull them close together, because that's going to put a lot of stress onto the pylons. Okay, so by making them loose, they can expand and they can contract without actually affecting the pylons which they're attached to. Okay, now expansion and contraction doesn't just happen in solids, it also happens in liquids. So if we take a cold liquid and we give it heat energy, what's going to happen is the particles are going to move around more and they're going to take up more room. Okay, they're going to expand, and we exploit this fact in a thermometer. Okay, so here you can see the liquid showing that the temperature is 20 degrees C. If you add heat energy to this liquid inside the thermometer, the particles are going to move faster, they're going to move further apart, and the liquid's going to expand. Okay, if you take away the heat, then the particles are going to look more like this, they're going to be closer together, and the liquid is going to contract. Okay, so you notice the size of the particles hasn't changed, it's just how far apart they are. And finally, okay, just as with solids and liquids, air, which is a gas, and any gas will expand when it's heated and contract when it's cooled. Okay, so if you take particles inside this bottle, for example, air particles, and you heat them up, they'll move around much quicker, they'll take up much more space, and if you can see here, what's happened is that they're taking up even more space. If you give it to them, they'll take up more space, and they'll cause the gas to expand. You take away the heat energy, the particles are going to move around more slowly, take up less space, and it's going to contract. Okay, so you can see air from here has moved back into here when we have the air being cooled. Okay, so the overall message here is solids, liquids and gases, if you heat them they expand, if you cool them they contract.